Vasily Ivanovich Ignatenko was born on March 13, 1961, in a small Belarusian village called Spiarizhya in the Gomel region of the Soviet Union. His childhood was simple, quiet, and surrounded by nature, birch forests, slow rivers, and the scent of wet soil after rain. The Ignatenko family lived modestly, like most rural families in the post-war Soviet years. His father, Ivan, worked in agriculture. His mother, Maria, took care of the home and raised Vasily and his younger siblings. They didn't have television or luxuries. Evenings were spent by the stove, listening to the radio and stories of war, the great patriotic war, which still cast its shadow across the generation. From those stories, Vasily learned about bravery, loyalty, and sacrifice. Neighbors remembered him as a calm and kind boy. When others were loud and mischievous, Vasily was quiet, thoughtful. He would help older people chop wood or carry buckets of water from the well. When someone's barn caught fire one summer, Vasily, just a child then, ran to alert the neighbors before the flames spread. That moment stayed with him. In school, he was average, not the best student, but responsible. Teachers often described him as steady, a boy who didn't seek trouble or glory. But he loved physical work, the kind that made you sweat and ache. He liked to feel useful. As he grew older, Vasily's sense of duty deepened. He wanted to serve, to be part of something larger than himself. The army didn't appeal to him. He had seen too many broken men return from Afghanistan. But firefighting, that was different. It was honorable. It was about saving lives. In the late 1970s, after completing school, he enrolled in a fire training academy in Gomel. The courses were tough, long drills, endless physical tests, and theory about how to handle smoke, pressure, and chemical fires. But Vasily never complained. He believed that if something was worth doing, it was worth doing properly. After graduating, he joined the regional fire department. His discipline quickly stood out. Superiors called him a man you could rely on. His colleagues said he was the first to volunteer and the last to rest. In 1982, when a new city was being built in northern Ukraine, Pripyat, Vasily was offered a transfer there. It was a model city, designed to house the workers of the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. Modern apartments, kindergartens, cafes, sports halls. It was the pride of the Soviet Union. Vasily accepted without hesitation. He was 21 years old, ready for a new chapter. When Vasily arrived in Pripyat, it felt like a dream. The city was alive. Young families, music from open windows, bicycles on wide, clean streets, laughter echoing in the courtyards. Everything was new, polished, and full of promise. He was assigned to fire station number 6, which served the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The work was routine, small fires, inspections, drills, but the camaraderie was strong. The firefighters were proud of their unit. They called themselves the Guardians of the Atom. It was during one of those quiet days that Vasily met Liudmila. She was a nurse at the city hospital, bright-eyed, quick to smile, and always rushing somewhere. A mutual friend introduced them at a dance. He was shy. She teased him about being too serious. But that night, they danced until the music stopped. Their relationship grew quickly. They'd meet by the river, share meals in the park, talk for hours about their families and the future. Vasily would often walk her home, carrying her bag, never saying much, but always listening. They married in 1983. Their wedding was modest, a small gathering of friends and family, some laughter, some vodka, and a cheap camera capturing blurry photographs of two people in love. They moved into a small apartment on Druzhby Narodiv Street. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. By 1986, they were expecting their first child. Liudmila was a few months pregnant and glowing. Vasily would rest his hand on her stomach every night before bed, whispering jokes to the unborn baby, promising to be a good father. He built a small wooden crib himself during his days off. Life seemed perfect. Steady pay, a loving wife, a child on the way. and a peaceful city built for the future. They were both proud to be part of something big, the nuclear age, as the papers called it. But beneath that bright optimism, something dark was brewing. Reactor number 4 was unstable, and on a warm spring night in April, everything would change. It was just after 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. Liudmila woke to the sound of distant thunder, or what she thought was thunder, but the sky was clear. Moments later, the phone rang. Vasily reached for it, already half awake. A call from the fire station. "There's a fire at the power plant," the voice said. "They need the brigade immediately." He dressed in silence, putting on his uniform, boots and belt with automatic precision. Liudmila asked what was wrong. He smiled faintly. "It's just the plant. Don't worry. Go back to sleep." Those were his last words to her at home. Outside, the air was cool and still. The fire trucks roared to life, sirens slicing the night as they sped toward the plant. What greeted them was unlike anything they had ever seen. Reactor number 4 was in ruins. The building's roof had been torn apart by an explosion. Chunks of graphite, glowing red, littered the ground. The night sky shimmered with a strange blue light, Cherenkov radiation dancing through ionized air. The men were confused. They weren't told it was the reactor itself. They thought it was just a fire on the turbine roof. They began to climb ladders, carrying hoses, boots melting from the heat. Water sprayed into the darkness, evaporating instantly. Vasily and his comrades, Kibanok, Pravik, Titnok, and others, ran toward the flames. They stepped on fragments of radioactive fuel without knowing. The dosimeters they carried went off the scale. At 2 a.m., a helicopter pilot flying overhead reported that the reactor core was open, spewing lethal radiation. But on the ground, the firefighters continued. Duty, instinct, and loyalty kept them there. Witnesses later said Vasily was among the last to come down from the roof. His face was pale. His movements were slow. He could barely remove his helmet. He told one colleague, "It's strange. There's a taste of metal in my mouth." He had just absorbed a fatal dose. The fire at Reactor 4 was unlike any blaze ever seen before. The heat was unbearable. Asphalt bubbled under their boots. The air itself seemed to hum. Vasily and the others climbed higher onto the roof of Unit 3, aiming their hoses toward the glowing crater that used to be the reactor building. They had no protective suits, just their cotton uniforms, helmets, and gloves. No one had told them the truth. The reactor core had exploded. They believed it was a simple electrical fire. They moved fast, instinctively, trained to react, not to question. One man pulled burning debris away with his bare hands, thinking it was roof tar. It was graphite from the reactor core, pure radiation. The blue light danced around them like ghost fire. Metal hissed as it melted. The water they sprayed turned to steam before it hit the flames. Vasily's brigade worked non-stop. They ran up and down ladders, choking on smoke, coughing up blood. Yet not one of them retreated. They knew the plant was surrounded by other reactors. If those caught fire, the explosion could destroy half of Europe. By 3:30 a.m., the fires were mostly contained. Reactor 3's roof was saved. The men had done the impossible, at the cost of their own lives. When Vasily climbed down, he was exhausted. His face was pale, his lips cracked, and his eyes burned with fever. He could barely stand. A colleague, Ivan, remembered him saying quietly, "We did our job, didn't we?" Back at the station, he began to vomit violently. He asked for water but couldn't keep it down. His skin was turning red, almost glowing. His breath smelled of metal, a sign of acute radiation exposure. Still, he tried to reassure everyone. "It's just smoke. It'll pass." But deep down, he already knew something was terribly wrong. By morning, ambulances were lining the streets of Pripyat. Vasily and his entire crew were loaded into them, wrapped in blankets, moaning softly, too weak to stand. They were taken first to the local hospital, then airlifted to Moscow, to hospital number 6. a secret medical facility for radiation victims. When Liudmila heard that Vasily had been sent to Moscow, she packed a small bag and left immediately. She was 3 months pregnant, but she didn't care. She boarded a train without a ticket and traveled through the night, clutching her husband's photo. At hospital number 6, the doctors tried to keep the public away. The firefighters were dying, and the truth about Chernobyl was still being hidden. Visitors weren't allowed. Patients were kept in sealed rooms lined with lead. But Liudmila found a way in. She bribed a nurse with a bar of chocolate and slipped through the doors. What she saw broke her heart. Vasily was lying on a white bed, his face swollen, his lips cracked, his skin covered in burns that weren't from fire, but from radiation. His hair had started to fall out. He smiled faintly when he saw her and whispered, "Liuda, don't cry. I'm fine." Doctors warned her not to touch him. "He's radioactive," they said. "You'll harm your baby." But she refused to leave. She sat beside him every day, sneaking in milk, apples, anything he asked for. She helped change his sheets when the nurses were too afraid. Each day Vasily grew weaker. He bled internally. His gums turned black. The radiation was destroying him cell by cell. He asked her for water constantly. His throat burned as if he had swallowed fire. Other firefighters in nearby rooms screamed through the nights. Some had hallucinations. Their skin peeled off in sheets. The doctors worked silently, helplessly, knowing there was nothing to be done. After a week, Vasily could no longer move. He told Liudmila about the night of the explosion, how the sky glowed blue, how the roof felt like it was alive with heat. "We didn't know," he whispered. "We thought it was just a fire." Liudmila wiped his forehead and said, "You did your duty." He smiled faintly. "I'd do it again." On May 13th, 1986, 17 days after the explosion, Vasily Ignatenko died. He was 25 years old. The doctors didn't allow Liudmila to see his body at first. When they finally did, they gave her a protective coat, gloves, and a mask. His body was swollen, unrecognizable. His eyes were closed, his mouth slightly open, as if he were still trying to speak. She leaned down, kissed him through the fabric, and said goodbye. The hospital staff sealed his body in a zinc coffin, wrapped it in plastic, and poured concrete over it. Even in death, he was too radioactive to be buried normally. They buried him in the Matino Cemetery in Moscow, along with his comrades, the first victims of Chernobyl. Their graves were marked only by numbers at first. Later, names were added. Liudmila returned home to Pripyat, which was now an empty ghost city. Her apartment was frozen in time, cups still on the table, Vasily's uniform hanging by the door. The silence was unbearable. 2 months later, she gave birth to a girl. The baby survived only 4 hours. The doctors said the radiation had destroyed her heart. Liudmila lived with that pain for the rest of her life. In later interviews, she said, "They told me not to touch him, but how could I not? He was my husband. He needed me. If I had left, he would have died alone." Her story became the voice of every family broken by Chernobyl, the human cost behind the numbers. Decades later, people still visit Vasily's grave. They bring flowers, firefighter helmets, and handwritten notes. Some are from other firefighters, some are from strangers who never knew him. The concrete slab is cracked now, but the memory of what he did has never faded. In 1997, the Belarusian government posthumously awarded him the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. His photograph hangs in fire stations across Belarus and Ukraine, a symbol of courage, duty, and sacrifice. Liudmila moved to Kyiv, where she tried to rebuild her life. She gave interviews, sometimes crying, sometimes silent for long stretches. She said, "I remember how his hands felt, how he laughed." That's all I have left. Her story inspired countless others. It became one of the central testimonies in Svetlana Alexievich's Voices from Chernobyl, a book that captured the pain, confusion, and quiet heroism of those days. Later, HBO's Chernobyl series introduced Vasily's name to the world. Millions watched and cried, finally seeing what had long been hidden. But beyond the books and films, Vasily's story is not just about tragedy, it's about love, duty, and humanity. He was a man who did not run away when everyone else would have. He went toward the fire. He didn't know it was death itself, waiting there in the reactor's blue glow. He only knew that people needed help, and that was enough. When you visit the Chernobyl exclusion zone today, Pripyat is silent. Trees grow through the floors of abandoned apartments. Children's toys still lie on classroom desks. Nature has reclaimed everything. But if you walk through those empty streets at dawn, the city seems to whisper. You can almost hear the echo of sirens, the distant rumble of engines, and the quiet courage of the men who went to fight the fire. Among them, forever young, stands Vasily Ignatenko, the firefighter who faced the impossible and gave his life so others might live.